All right, all right. With that being said, what is going on, everybody? If you don't know, now you do know. You're officially tuned in to a very special edition of the HFWB podcast series. This is your host, Clifton Pope. And of course, this episode of the HFWB podcast series is always being sponsored by goandfeelgreat.com. That is goandfeelgreat.com, to where you can basically learn about time-based eating patterns as far as dealing with our busy lives, our to-do list always being full, but when it comes down to it, the willpower's not there. But with so many roadblocks getting in the way of our health goals, we need high quality support, which is why if you go visit goandfeelgreat.com, you can be introduced to the Go and Feel Great system, to where it can help you get that time-based eating pattern back in order and at the same time combat insulin resistance. So that, of course, the HFWB podcast series is always sponsored by goandfeelgreat.com. You could give them a call at 832-408-1930 or go and visit them at goandfeelgreat.com, the official website. But with that being said, the gentleman who I'm about to bring on as far as my guest for today, man, you're going to love this individual within itself, because he has that against all odds inspirational story. I mean, he did not intend to be an inspiration to others. That's what makes it so funny. I mean, his humble beginnings of just coming up from the Armada Housing Projects here in Corpus Christi, Texas, to becoming the founder and CEO of Asset Protection and Security Services. And if you don't know what that is, it's a private security services contractor and one of the most successful Hispanic businesses in the nation. And he'll definitely explain that a little bit more in details here in just a moment. But just to kind of throw a little bit of details about him, he's a talented entrepreneur with an energetic personality, and he's without a doubt one of the Coastal Bend's most successful businessmen. I mean, his personal and professional achievements could fill literally several pages. I mean, among them are the top 100 government contractors, according to Government Security News for the past 2 years, Inc. magazine's top 500 fastest growing companies, and Hispanic Business magazine's top 100 fast growing companies, and top 500 Hispanic companies in the country for the past 7 years. I mean, come on now. Who doesn't love a little bit of hard work that pays dividends? And if you don't know who I'm talking about by now at this point, I want to introduce Mr. Charles Scott Mandel to the HFWB podcast series. Scott, how's it going on this wonderful Feel Good Friday, my friend?
It's going fantastic, Clifton. Thank you very much for having me. Happy to be here with you today. And thanks for that wonderful introduction.
No, it's well deserved, basically, for the work that was put in. I mean, Scott, I'll just be completely honest with you before we dive into this. I literally have a book that's called, my first self-published book, that's called What's Wealth Without Work. Your overall story basically fits the whole theme of what I've been explaining to people within the last couple of years, is that you got to put in the work and make it work to basically create your own wealth. And it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, you have to go through the everyday struggles just like everybody else, and then just, of course, make it into your own, to where you can create generational wealth. I mean, you created literally your own family business, so to speak, Scott. Before we get into how all that came together, a lot of people don't know about, as far as your beginnings and everything. A lot of people don't know that your grandparents had a huge impact and influence on your overall life and your beginnings, and which kind of instilled that idea of just that hard work mentality, which kind of led to your overall journey as far as your educational background. And then, of course, diving into law enforcement. And then, of course, just becoming a business owner. Kind of break down that whole entire process for everyone who's currently listening to this episode of the HFWB podcast series.
Hey, so Clifton, the big part of, I think, what helped create my level of success is the ethics that were instilled in me early on by my grandparents, right? And my parents. Right. And that was that you got to work hard. And I was always busy. I'm sort of that kid that didn't know I had like ADD, ADHD, always thinking, always on the move, always wanted to do something. And so early on, I started working. We had a little family ranch in Alice, Texas, and I was out cutting firewood. I was helping in any way I could out on the farm. And then in the city, I wanted to find a way to make money. So when I was 14, I was diving in dumpsters at bars along Leopard Street, picking up aluminum cans because
Right.
selling them back then, you'd make a little bit of money. And so I had to think about where could I find the most aluminum cans? And I thought, it's got to be the bar. And so it worked out real well. My grandparents drove me. They,
Yep.
I had all my trash bags ready. I jumped in and threw them out and then loaded them up and on we went. So it was the support of family. It was the drive that, again, was instilled in me early on that really helped me get to where I am today.
Right, right, and that's a very good point. I mean, just having that family system installed in at a young age, because there's some people who've grown up with broken families, but you were fortunate and blessed, Scott, to have that family system and kind of have that important ethic of just hard work that pays off. And like you said it yourself, and people have said that about you, hard work paying dividends. And it kind of just fed in, of course, learning from those days of picking up those aluminum cans to make some cash, and then just fast forward diving into your overall educational experience, going to Del Mar and stuff like that. And then fast forward again, then you go into overall law enforcement. Like, where did that whole process come from as far as just you putting together the idea of like, hey, now I want to get involved in law enforcement, and as far as understanding that a little bit more in details?
A lot of kids, when they grow up, I say a lot, but a lot of kids talk about, I want to be a doctor, a lawyer, a judge. They've got firemen, they've got some kind of concept. Really growing up, I didn't know what I wanted to be. I was
Right.
happy to get out of high school. After that, I thought, well, I was sort of at that crossroads. What am I going to do? And
Mm-hmm.
so I went and I sold cars for a while. Mingaro's Mobile in Corpus Christi off Everhart. I worked there for about a year. And while I was going to school at Del Mar, and then my grandfather mentioned, he said, hey, why don't you work for the sheriff's office? I know the sheriff. And I thought, well, you know what, that'd be a good job. And so I started working for the sheriff's office in 1981. And that's how that part of the law enforcement process began. So really, it's, I was just I was one of those kids. Look, I think the beauty of my story is that it's not only the hard work pays off, but that it is against all odds, because I grew up poor. Not only, as you mentioned, the Armada Housing Project, I wasn't the best student. I mean, I did get lucky enough to go to Incarnate Word Academy here in Corpus Christi,
Right.
but
Right.
it was tuition back then was, I think, $90 a month, and mine was modified because of the fact that my parents agreed that I would agree to work over the summers at the school. But honestly, I think out of our 70 in our graduating class, I was probably 60. I wasn't one of those brilliant kids, and so I've had challenges and obstacles in front of me the entire time. But the difference is I just keep kicking them down, right?
Yeah.
That's my goal, is that I don't let anything bother me for too long. I find a way around that obstacle. And so that's been a drive that I've had early on. And so as I was finding my way, people ask me today, they say, hey, I mean, how did you really get to where you're at? And I said, through hard work, determination, God's good grace, and very blessed to be where I am today. I would have never imagined that I would be where I am today, and that I would sit back and be able to say, yeah, I built a company that over the last 23 years, we've eclipsed well over $1 billion in sales.
Mm-hmm.
That, for what I consider myself to be sort of a C student out of the projects, not having a lot of ambition early on, I put myself in a position where I went back to school, got my degrees, and not only at Del Mar College, but at Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi. And so that created a little bit of discipline for me in getting those degrees, right? So, but I'm just an average kid, and it was never easy for me, but I just kept pushing through, and that made a big difference, is that level of determination.
That level of determination, the willingness to pursue information, knowledge, and just overall resources, which is kind of what you did within your overall journey, Scott, as you alluded to. I mean, you got your bachelor's degree in criminal justice. You got a master's degree in public administration. A lot of people don't even know that. And then going through your overall journey of what you learned as far as within the law enforcement, within you working at the sheriff's department, then of course transitioning to a little bit of crime prevention in time, and then you began to dive into the process of really just aggressively growing your overall business, which is now asset protection and security service. Kind of describe like the beginnings of stages of kind of doing like the establishment of the business, like kind of describe like your overall process behind it, how it has become the business that it is, grossing, like you alluded to, over $1 billion in sales. How did asset protections and security services become the private growing business that it is today? Not only just in the coastal bend, but just in America in general.
So let me back up even just a little bit further, if I may. So
Yeah, go ahead.
when I was in law enforcement, I had a wonderful career because I spent 5 years for the sheriff's office, and the last 3 of those I focused on missing and exploited children. Right. And that work that we did was not only in Nueces County, but around the state and around the country. Right. When in 1994, I believe it was, Ronald Reagan, I've got to go back and look at the date, but Ronald Reagan created Missing Children's Day. And as a result, it created the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Okay. And that was in 83. And that organization was under the Department of Justice, and it was created based on Washington, D.C. Okay. Because of the work that I did, and they knew me at a national level. They asked if I would go to work there, and I accepted the job. 26, married, no kids. My wife and I said, what do we got to lose? Let's take it. We've never moved. We've never really been out of the state of Texas. Right. And so I worked at the National Center for 4 years, and my focus was dealing with missing and exploited children. And then I came back and ran a narcotics task force for the sheriff's office in Kingsville, Texas, after I finished my 4-year stint there. But my point that I'm making is that I felt there was much more that I could do. Yeah. And for me, my mind is always spinning, always thinking about what can I do.
Yeah, always finding room for growth, evolution, and room for improvement. I agree.
Yeah, and law enforcement was just it was a little slow for my pace, for my mindset. But I saw that security companies weren't really delivering what they could deliver at a certain level they should be delivering it at. So that's when I decided to start that security company. And I bought a burglar and alarm franchise called Dynamark Security Centers. And Dynamark is still in existence today. My brother owns it, but he and I owned it early on. We started a security part of the division. And after that, I took that and went my own way. And that's when asset protection was created. Now, we were doing local contracts here. Now, to answer your question specifically, we're doing local contracts, and we were focused on, we had them with Sunrise Mall and Del Mar College.
All right.
We did that for years. And it wasn't until I picked up my first federal contract that started to change everything for me. Now we were able to work outside of Corpus Christi. We were able to work for the federal system. And then from there, I remember the first contract was the Department of Agriculture down by McAllen, Texas, somewhere. Okay. And it was only 7 or 8 people. But then we jumped to doing a detention contract with immigration, and that became 250 people. And then that jumped to another detention contract, another 250 people. And that jumped to a third one and a fourth one and a fifth one. And so that opened up our business completely. And before you know it, we had over 1,000 employees, and we were doing quite a bit of volume. And so when we became a government contractor is when things changed for asset protection.
That's incredible within itself. And I mean, kind of like elaborate a little bit more on like the importance of government contracting services and how it's beneficial just to businesses in general, for those who are kind of like wondering, like, what is government contracting? What does that have to do with, say, for instance, my business? Is it important? Is it not important? What would you say in regards to that based on your current experience within the government contracting services business?
If you have a product, or you're a business and you have a product or a service that the government needs, right? So you can go to different government websites and see what kind of bids that they're looking for. And if you have a product or service that they need, you first apply to be a small business. And then they also have designations for people and designations for veterans, disabled veterans, for Hispanics, minorities, African Americans. They have a list of them, and you can start with that, and then you can apply to be an 8A contractor. An 8A contractor is a special designation under the Small Business Administration.
Okay,
and then
that's good to know. Good to know.
Yeah, and then you go look for work based on what you provide. You look for those contracts, and that's what we did. And I remember after I became part of that program, I was complaining to the person assigned to me from the SBA, and I said, "Hey, listen," I said, "you said I was going to get all kinds of work, and here we are a year later, and I've got nothing." And he said,
"They're not holding up their end of the bargain, man."
And here's what I remember him saying. He said, Fred Manzanatos is the guy's name, and I haven't talked to him in a while, but he made a big impact in what happened to me. He said, "Do you think the work's going to come to you?" He said, "What are you doing to go get the work?" That's all he had to say right there. That's all he had to say. And I said, Fred, you're right. And so at that point, I realized that I needed to market our company. And that's what I did next. I put information out there to all the different agencies that I could and let them know these are the services we provide. And so even to this day, I still help people. I get somebody to call me that said, "Hey, my coffee company out of San Antonio, I'm in HEBs, but I want to do work with the feds." And I gave him the pathway of what to do. It's a lot of what I just talked about. And I've got other folks that reach out to me that ask me the same questions, and I'm happy to give them that information and to follow that path to see what they can do in providing services to the government. If that's something you want to do, that's a great way to go. If you want to be a government contractor in some way, it's been the difference for us for asset protection.
This is really a good transition right here, Scott, because this actually feeds into the next question that I was just about to ask you that just came to my head. Is there a particular moment that sticks out to you whenever you did start, of course, asset protection and security services that kind of just solidified your overall reason of wanting to expand, like the security services businesses, kind of how you described earlier, that kind of solidified it, like, hey, we're here and now we're going to officially make things happen and making a real difference?
When I noticed the gap that existed, that I thought I could have provide a better service, right? So really it all started at Sunrise Mall when I said, "Man, the guard image is horrible. We need to really improve it." Sharp uniforms, people that work for the military, former military people.
Right.
We and training, and we did physical training every 2 weeks there. We had a wonderful team. We looked sharp. We responded very professionally. That made a difference. But I think it all came to be when I was offered my first big federal contract.
That federal money. Got it.
And I realized, wow, this is a game changer. That was when I realized that my little concept back then about providing a quality service took me to where I am today, because I wasn't happy with what was there. I didn't like the status quo, and I wanted to change that status quo. And that was my goal. And it was when I was given that contract that I said, "This is crazy." I said, what am I going to do now? This was for several hundred people. And so my next issue, Clifton, was money. Didn't have it, right? Yeah. And the government contract required $1 million to start because I had to make payroll.
And you needed access to capital.
I didn't have it. So I went to 7 banks. I said I would give them whatever I had. All 7 said no. All 7 said no. I had to go to a factoring business out of Dallas at 14 or 15% and pledge my soul to them. And that's when they said yes. And because of that one move right then and there, I was able to go forward with it. And that was a turning point right there for us, our starting point.
I love it. I love it. And that alone just kind of makes a difference as far as just being able to provide, again, like you alluded to, a product or a service that the government needs and that they could benefit off of. Like, a lot of people don't notice, and you could probably attest to this maybe more than I can, Scott. A lot of people don't realize if you provide like the opportunity for like just, for instance, housing alone, like places for people to live, there's so many benefits that you can get as far as from a tax standpoint from the government alone that people don't even know about, which is why real estate is and forever will be such a big thing, because there's always going to be a need for somewhere for someone to live, and at the same time for instance, a commercial property for a business to be able to operate their business from and stuff like that. So that's where you're providing a need that the government basically needs, because they need housing, they need buildings for all the land and stuff that's on this overall country. So that's a very good point as far as what you were alluded to earlier, Scott, as far as overall providing something that the government needs and they can benefit off of. And another thing like the government can benefit off of is, of course, just security services, because we do need to be protected just in case there's some sort of infinite threat that comes out of nowhere, which is, of course, comes down to improving, like you've been doing your whole entire life, the need for better security services, the need for more effective law enforcement and everything. And speaking of all of this, based on the current state, as far as the year we're in, 2024, and going forward, where do you see the direction of law enforcement? Where do you see the direction of security services based off of everything you've been doing currently and based off your overall experiences in the past, just doing all these things? Where do you see the direction going 2024 and beyond?
Look, I'm a big supporter of law enforcement. Obviously, I came from the badge, and I support the badge. And I think that it's been very challenging lately for people in law enforcement with all the issues you've heard in the media over the last 5 to 7 years.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And the microscope has been placed on it. And look, you're going to have people that just are going to have their mindsets that are not. They're going to have
their own agendas.
They are, and they're just not going to agree with what you would consider to be the average standard norm, the regular mindset that people have in helping. And some people also get in situations where their adrenaline takes them to a different level and they do things that they later regret doing. I think they're facing their challenges, but for the most part, law enforcement helps keep our society from chaos.
Oh, right? Without question.
And at the end, it's a key component, in my opinion, to help us. And even with law enforcement today, look at San Francisco for a minute. Look at the smash and grabs that are happening and the challenges that we're facing in the bigger cities that we're still having trouble managing from a law enforcement perspective. But if they weren't there, then I think things would be much more chaotic. On a security standpoint, I think you've seen people hire more security forces because of that fact that law enforcement can be everywhere. They've got budgets, they've got restrictions, so they augment it with security services. And so we haven't done anything at that level where we do work again for the private sector, if you will. We've stayed focused on the federal side, and that's where what we know best, and so we've stayed there. But I think that you're going to see a tremendous need for security services moving forward. Law enforcement, it's going to really come down to more training all the way through. And
I agree with that.
Yeah, and I think that's a direction we're going in. But I think everybody's having a problem with hiring. I think that one of the challenges post-COVID is people just don't really want to work. I think everybody is struggling with the fact that they're short-staffed. I think most departments you go to are short-staffed by 15 or 20%. Fire department, police department, security companies. I think people are having trouble finding staff.
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right about that. It's like every other day, it's like you see either a business in general just short staffed or that business just closing down within itself. And it's like, it's a challenge as far as just, being able to just maintain your own business and maintaining the overall mission of why you built your business to begin with and stuff like that. And yeah, it just comes down to just finding the right people who can fit those right job description roles that are needed to, of course, build that overall structure of the business up from starting from the top and working it's all the way down from the bottom as far as like expanding the branches within that overall tree, so to speak. For someone, Scott, who is kind of like interested just in general for wanting to start their own business, what would you tell them as far as like 3 key pieces of advice as far as just getting on track just to creating your own business, just off of your experience?
So a lot of people create businesses because it's what they know, it's
Mm-hmm.
what they love.
Yeah.
And if they can make a living doing it,
Mm-hmm.
do it. Fantastic. Success is defined by you. Don't let me define your success. It's really how you define it. You
Yep.
can have a great little small business. You can work from home. You can have an office. You can have you be the only employee. You can have 100 employees. Doesn't matter. How you define success is really all about you. But to start it, look at what the market needs. Look at what is in demand at the moment. And then
Right.
when you take and evaluate that and then find out how big of a demand there is for your services, not only at a local level, maybe a county, a state level, a national level with the feds, then you can decide how to multiply that up, right? How to step it up and build it from there once you get an understanding of how business works. It's not easy. I mean,
What is it?
you have to pay Uncle Sam. I remember working, on average 16 hours a day. And I was managing everything. I was the one-man show with HR, payroll, you name it. I was doing it. And
And
so,
it definitely led to times of just feeling like burnt out because you were taking on so many duties at once.
yeah, but the way my mind works is I love being busy. So for
No,
me,
yeah,
it was actually fantastic. It kept me busy, right? Kept me more
yeah,
busy.
yeah.
But find something you love doing, and if you can make that work, fantastic. And if not, then find something that you know, and if you can make that work, then fantastic. But I think those are the 2 avenues. Those are the 2 choices. So, again, if I think that I could start a lawn mowing business, I need to first evaluate, is that something I love doing, or is that something I know about? And then how do I take it and build it and grow it? How do I grow it on a local level, a larger level? One of the businesses we have, and I bring this up as an example, is because we have a lawn and landscape business as well. We do a lot of different things under our umbrella. And that's what I did with that business. And so we started doing commercial accounts. And then from there, we had an option to do multi-county, statewide accounts. And so it's just how you want to build it and where you take it. How hard you want to work is what it comes down to. You can work and have a job or a business that is an 8-hour a day job or business for you, or you can maybe expand it to multiple cities, states, and then you're going to be working 16 hours a day. If you're okay with that, do what works for you. That's the most important part, Clifton. Do what works for you.
I love that. And for everybody who's listening to this episode of the HFWB podcast series, you need to rewind that part Scott just said within itself. Do what works for you, and that hard work that you put into what works for you is basically will pay dividends, and it will definitely make a difference in due time. And it really that's the main thing that people seem to forget as well, Scott, and you can agree with this more than I can probably. It's success is all about timing. If the timing is not right, it's not going to work out regardless of what you do, what works for you, and regardless of the hard work that's put in. Timing has to be on your side a little bit as well, and it'll definitely make a difference in the process too. But overall, Scott, we're actually at the point where I'm going to ask you a list of questions that I usually ask everybody who comes on to the podcast, just to allow the people to get to know you a little bit more, pick your brain as well. First question I have, Scott, is what is the first thing you do or think of every single day that you wake up?
I'm going to even back up just a little bit further. I plan my day the night before I go to bed. I go to bed with an iPad on my chest. I look at the weather. I look at my agenda, and then I plan it so that when I wake up, I'm not worried about it. I get up. I have a pretty set routine. I drink 2 bottles of water in the morning. I drink a shake. My shake just has apple and blueberries in it, and it's just a regular shake. I put a look. I'm 61, right? I put a scoop of Metamucil in. I don't take any medicine, right? I've been fortunate that I'm not on any medications at all, but I do that pretty faithfully, and I eat 1 good meal a day. But when I wake up in the morning, I'm focused on what I wrote the night before. I already know my plan when I wake up, so I'm not developing it. I'm not wasting time when I wake up in the morning.
That's probably the most different and unique answer that I've ever heard to that question, as far as everyone who I've asked on the podcast that particular question. That's a very good point right there as well, Scott. Plan your morning the night before. That way, when you wake up the next day, you're already right into the groove of things. And that's a very good point, and that's something that I currently do myself. I kind of have like a set routine as far as what I already know what I'm going to do the moment that I wake up. I know that I'm going to read my book a little bit, do my journal entry. I know I'm going to say my morning prayer. I'm going to have my morning meditation, do my affirmations and visualizations. I already know that's set in stone within the first hour or two of me waking up. And on top of that, getting a nice workout in and exercising as well. That's the main key I got to make sure I do on most days, every single day for the most part. Of course, I have my rest days from exercising, but most importantly, journal entry, reading, prayer, meditation, affirmation, visualizations every single day for sure. But that kind of leads into the next question that I'm about to ask you as well. As far as health and wealth, we hear this all the time. Health is wealth. They're basically 2 sides of the coin. You can't have one without the other. In your eyes, Scott, what is your personal definition of health and wealth to yourself?
Well, so listen, on the side of health, mental health first and foremost is number one. That's why I dig what you're talking about in regards to your routine, because you've got more of a mental routine to begin with, and that is very important. If you start with some meditation, if you start with reading some positive thoughts, if you start with charging your day that way, first, physical health means nothing without mental health. I'm telling you right now, it's all about mental health. And we're starting to see it more and more now. People are starting to talk about it more and more. Exactly. And I think that that's one of my big messages is be sure that it's about a mindset. It's about keeping your mind sharp and healthy. And it starts there. From there, then goes to physical health. And then at least working out 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, body in motion stays in motion. You've heard it. You do that. And then I'm telling you, we have this misconception that we have to eat 3 meals a day and big meals. And we need to find a way to understand that not every diet works. Most diets won't work for people specifically, right? Like you might start on a keto diet or a Mediterranean diet or other diets, and you think that's your diet. It may not work for you. You still have to, I'm gonna say this again. You do what works for you, right? You find that rhythm, and that's throughout life. That's what works for you, and it relates to mental health, physical health, business. It relates to your mindset. And so for me, I like I said, I start off with my 2 bottles of water, and I start off with I do a shake, and then a little later I'll do a protein bar, and then I do my full meal, and then I'll do snacks, healthy snacks before dinner. Then I'll do a light dinner, and I'll finish off with some tea. But I think that health of the two, that's the order I put them in. Mental health first. And so, look, I've been very fortunate. Again, I'm 61. I don't know if people do this on your podcast, but how about this? 61, and at least have some kind of physical, capability. And honestly, it's a light 30-minute workout that I try to do a few times a week, but it's about diet. It's about the right mindset, and that mental health is key.
Man, Scott, that was such a fantastic answer. I gotta like have that as like a quote as far as for what health, fitness, wealth, business, my overall company is about, because you basically summed it up to a T of what I've been trying to explain to people really since the post-pandemic 2021 when I started doing everything that I'm currently doing. And at the same time, you alluded to a very, very important point that I always like to say: train the mind and then the body will follow. That's what I've been telling people for literally the last 2 years. And you just explained pretty much the best definition of what I've been trying to tell people myself. And again, I couldn't agree any more with what you just said. And it just feeds to just your overall ability of just being not only effective, Scott, but an effective leader in everything that you currently do on a regular basis. Define leadership, or just what makes a great leader in your eyes.
I will pick up a mop and help my staff. I will wash windows if I need to. I'll jump on a tractor. I will do what I need to do because I lead from behind and not always from in front. And I start from behind and work my way up through and to the front by showing them that I'm willing to do it. And it really motivates people when they see that, because I just don't sit back and say, hey, do this, you do that. And I do it with respect. That's the other part, is I lead with dignity and respect. And you've got to treat people fair. And when you do that, they respond better. And it's that ugliness that just, it doesn't work. From a lot of people, it doesn't work. Of course, the military does, because you have no choice. But everywhere else in civilian life, you've got to treat people right. And so that's been a big part of my success, is that I do what I ask other people to do. I'm not afraid to do that. And so, listen, we've got I've got employees. I've got a ranch. I work out there quite a bit physically. I'm out doing a lot with my staff. We had a septic backup here a while back, and I was with them every step of the way. I could have just said, "Oh man, I don't want to mess with that," but I was with them every step of the way. And so, and then I spend my time where I can doing that and helping people. But again, a leader, you read, there's 50 definitions. Grab any book at a bookstore. How to be a great leader. What's leadership about? Is leadership, are you born with that skill set, or is it something that you've inherited, or did you develop it? I mean, there's 50 books about leadership. You can read them all, but again, you're gonna develop a form of leadership style that I would hope is what works for you. That's my T-shirt. Do what works for you. And if you have the right mindset about it, and that is that treating people with dignity and respect, you'll just get a lot better response, in my opinion. So that's what works for me.
No, that's kind of the exact same approach that I have to a certain degree. It really just starts with having respect for yourself, and then in return having respect for others, and the next thing you know, it comes all the way back around, which that's actually a great segue to my next segment of questions that I was going to ask you, which is called either or, which one you would choose out of either or. And the first one I usually ask is, which one would you choose out of loyalty or respect?
Man, that's a tough one. I think loyalty, I go with loyalty, because with loyalty develops respect. and
Gotcha.
get you and really you're one. They tie into each other.
They
It's
do. You
almost an
can't have one
arrow.
without the other, really.
Yeah, one ties into the other. So
Right.
I think that, but loyalty.
No problem. No problem. Would you rather live in space, Scott, or live in the ocean?
I'm a pilot, man. I fly at 41,000 feet. I love the I love the space above me, and I would say I would love to live up there because you know, I with our global warming, with all the challenges and issues that we have, eventually we're going to build. You remember the Jetsons, the car
Yes, yes.
from
That's a
way back in
classic
the day?
cartoon. Yes.
It's coming at some point, right? We're going to have our houses 100 feet in the air or sustained up there at some point, and these little jet propulsion vehicles are going to end up, taking you back and forth. At some point, I see that 50 years from now. Plus, it's a lot cooler up there. When I climb up there, it can be 100 degrees, or here on the ground. And as I work my way up, I can be at 5,000 feet, and all of a sudden it's 50 degrees. And so, the temperatures get much colder as you go higher. But I would say, without question, I would live in space. Now, it's a tough question for me personally because I'm also a diver. I love being underwater. So but I would prefer being up top.
That's an interesting point, and I really do truly believe we're eventually going to be living like the Jetsons, probably within the next, yeah, about 50 years. I could definitely see that myself. Now that you bring that up too, do would you rather be poor and famous or anonymous and rich?
The latter.
Got you. If now I want to paint this picture for you, Scott. Picture this scenario where when you're trapped on an island, right? And you had the opportunity to listen to five of your favorite music artists of all time. It doesn't matter what genre it is, it could be their whole entire catalog of music. Who would those five artists be?
Wow, 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 wow. That is a interesting question. So, first and foremost, I've gotten into Christian music, and I like We the Kingdom. All right, so I can listen to them.
Okay, that's one.
That's who I listen to in the mornings, by the way. So where you meditate, I listen to some Christian music, and I love their song "Holy Water." It's a fantastic song, and it gives me motivation in the morning. So I'd start with We the Kingdom. I would then do U2, right?
Mhm.
I love the band.
Okay,
Um, I think that I'm an old. I grew up, of course, in the '80s, and so I like the Stones. You got to
okay.
go back and put a little rock and roll in there.
You got to. You got
Um,
to.
and I'm a country guy.
Nothing wrong
Um,
with country music. I love country.
I love country, and I would say that you know that so many artists are just fantastic artists. I would say that you know old school Garth Brooks, great performer.
Okay.
Great songs, great music.
All right.
I'll have to think about that one again, but I think that one. And then listen, I love Shakira, man. Shakira, she's
Hmm.
another phenomenal artist, and
Mm.
has created. And these people have come from nothing and built. And I think that's part of why I respect them. They built a great brand
Mm.
and great music, and they've
Just their
done it.
overall story of just defying all odds, which kind of feeds into your story
That's
against
it.
all odds. So it's relatable for you, Scott. I can
Yeah,
see why you picked that unique playlist.
yeah. And that
Yeah,
would
for
that would
sure.
that would
And
be it for
also,
me.
Scott, I wanted to ask you: would you rather enjoy unlimited meals at your favorite restaurant or first class tickets? Unlimited first class tickets.
Oh, unlimited first class tickets. And I'm going to say this, and I think, really, if we focus on food, I used to focus on food a lot, and I hang out with a lot of doctors that are friends of mine, and I noticed that I would show up and we'd go fishing. And for lunch, I'd have hamburgers and I'd have big sandwiches and other things. All these docs would eat were like tuna.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one of the docs telling me, he said, man, maybe look at changing your diet, because if you stay focused on food all the time, he said, you don't need much of it to survive. Eat enough to survive. But if you take and look at how we distribute the mindset of what we eat, it's really way more. One meal really should be 2 meals for us. So when you go eat a good lunch, it really should be 2 meals, because that's too much food.
Yeah.
And so for me, first class tickets. I'd love to travel anywhere and everywhere.
As we focus on food for just a wee bit more, Scott, what is your favorite go-to meal?
I love a chicken avocado salad. A great chicken avocado salad. It's got tangerine in it. It's got walnuts in it. A grilled chicken.
That sounds very delicious,
A
actually.
grilled chicken. Yeah, that's my go-to.
Now, as far as from a traveling perspective, Scott, where is the favorite place that you have traveled to thus far? And where is a place you would like to travel to that you haven't been to before?
So I love Colorado. It's one of my favorite places to hang out.
Got you.
And when I'm woodsy, that's the place I like to go, because up in the foothills of the mountains in Colorado, I love being there. I climbed several mountains, 14ers, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's 52 14er peaks in Colorado. I've done 3, and I'd love to do the rest, and I'm hope to do the rest time permitting. So that's my woodsy spot. My beach spot is the Bahamas. Nassau is my place to be. I actually love San Diego, California.
Okay.
That area is just phenomenal.
I've heard so many people say that San Diego is very underrated, and it's just a beautiful place to visit.
It's phenomenal. And so I love hanging out there as well. I've traveled Europe pretty well. I love living in Corpus Christi. I know people hate Corpus. I mean, there's a lot of younger people that say, I'll never move back. They grew up here, went to school here, moved away, don't want to come back, because we have a smaller population. We're under 400,000. But honestly, I love traveling to all these places, but I love living in Corpus Christi for several reasons. Number one, I'm not a fan of traffic. And people spend a lot of time in traffic. I used to commute for hours when I lived in Washington, and that takes away from, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, are the 8s. The 8s are very important about talking about life. But because of traffic, I live in Corpus. Because the beach is here, I can fish here. I have a ranch an hour and a half from here. I can hunt here. It's great hunting, great food here. I mean, you got a variety of options. I love Corpus Christi. I'm a big advocate of Corpus and of itself. I think the one thing that we can do better is we can, and hear me, hopefully if anybody in city council is listening, let's pave our streets. Let's pave our downtown. My roads are smoother at the ranch than they are in the downtown district of Corpus Christi. I can say that. So that's one thing they do a better job of paving the roads. But
yeah, they need to come and fix the potholes on my street just here on the west side of Corpus Christi too. That would be great. I second that for sure. Now, Scott, I know you're a busy individual, but whenever you're not doing all the work that you're doing on a regular basis, you mentioned a couple things you like to do. You mentioned you like to hunt. You mentioned you like to fish. You mentioned you like to be out on the ranch, spending time with your family and stuff. Is there something in particular that you like doing, Scott, as far as a personal hobby of yours that many people may not know you like to do?
Fly. I love to fly. I love to jump in that airplane, get up there, and just hang out at whatever altitude I decide to pick. I just love the serenity of it, the peace behind it. I've got some of the most awesome pictures that I've taken from the places I've been, my sunrises and sunsets. I get to see sunrise before most people when I'm up at 40,000 feet. I see it before most people. And I see sunsets longer than most people if I'm up at that altitude. So that's just, yeah, that's it. I love doing that. That's my favorite hobby.
I love that. Last question, Scott, as we proceed to wrapping everything up. Now, if you had the opportunity to go back in time and talk to yourself 10 years ago, what would you tell yourself? And at the same time, Scott, based on your overall direction you're going, where do you see yourself in the next 10 years?
Going back 10 years, my advice wouldn't be much different than what I would tell myself, stay the course, because what I've done is what's worked for me.
Well
Right.
said.
I'm happy where I'm at. I'm happy where I've come from. I'm happy where I've been. In the next 10 years, I still feel like I wake up every day and I still in my mind, I don't have but a few pennies to rub together. I work every day just as hard as I did when I didn't have money. And I think for me, I'm hoping that just continues so that 10 years from now, I'm not ever going to stop working, by the way, to answer your question. I'll have my first book out. I'm going to do a podcast. I'll have a podcast out. I'm going to work on, I love theater. I love movies. I love the concept of writing scripts. I'm going to work with some folks and work on a series. While the business continues to propel itself forward, hopefully it's a family-run business. My kids are doing a phenomenal job. We're home builders. We got Mandel Homes over. We've got our subdivision off of Cimarron by Veterans Memorial. We do a lot of different things, right? So we're going to continue to push those businesses forward as I transition them more into running it completely. But as I step away, I'm going to focus on the things that I just mentioned, is giving advice to people and doing so in that podcast as well. And so moving forward 10 years from now, that's where I hope to be. But part of that advice, there's two things I want to finish with because I think they're very important.
No, by all means.
I want everybody to remember this. Nobody can take your happiness away except you. That's it. Nobody can take it away except you. They can try. They can beat on you. They can call you names. They can do what they want to do. They can pick on you, bully you, but truly inside, no one can take your happiness away. I say put on your suit of armor and keep that suit of armor on. And no matter what they do to you, no one can take your happiness away. So that's one important point. The second important point is you don't realize how much time we have on this earth. It's very limited. It really is. It's very, and if you look at a scale, right? I'm just sort of doing it right here in front of me. I've done this before. You take 0 to about 21, and you go through and look at that, and that's your formation years. Those are years you don't really know what life's about. You're just going through them, doing what your parents say. You've started college. You really don't know what's going on. It's not until more you're 25 that you realize I've got a job, got a girlfriend, maybe a wife, starting a family, that you develop in life in of itself. These are what I call the mid years. I call these the thirds. And so then you hit 55, 60, and you realize life's a little bit of a chore. Now it's a lot more difficult. I can't do things I used to do. I have issues with my knees or my back or you're seeing doctors more often. And then after 60, on the way up, I sort of discounted some of these years and I put some math to it. And then I go back to the eights. And let me tell you about the eights real quick. You live 8, you work 8, and you play for 8. So automatically, 8 are not yours because you work the 8. Yeah, another 8 are not yours because you sleep the 8. You have 8 that are yours. And if you get sick or you have other challenges or issues, that number shrinks. But as I did the math, I think my math was 4,566 days, quality days, 12.2 years that are your time. And so you need to live the 8s. That is really critical. And how you divide that up is understanding how important all of that is, really is important in my opinion in life. And that's one of the philosophies I try to follow. Now, if I'm working 16, then that means I lose 8 from the sleep side, or I lose 8 from my side, my time, my play time. And you
Mm.
make some of those sacrifices. But as you try to create a form of discipline in your life, and they call it that balance, right? In the past, it's been called
That
you got to have the
work-life
right work.
balance.
Yeah, the work-life balance. I just call it the 8s, and I try to just be sure that people understand how important that is. And so that's part of what I'm going to be talking about as well, and going in much more detail in the podcast that eventually I will start here, hopefully in the next 30 to 45 days, and talk about my success, talk about more in detail about my success, about business, talk about politics. Obviously, I think I just ran for Congress. I was not successful. And it's funny how people called and said, "Hey, are you okay? Hey, is everything all right?" That no, I didn't win, but I would never know what would have happened had I not run. If you don't try, you don't know. If you don't try, you don't know. And do what works for you. And that's what worked for me at the time. And I'm not going to give that up either. So I'm going to talk more about it as we draw near to that happening.
I love it. I love it. And yes, how can people get in contact with you, Scott, as far as following your overall journey, as far as leading up to the podcast, to the book? How can they reach you as far as phone numbers, emails, social media handles? How can they get in contact with you? Because your story, seems like it's just only getting started.
Well, so Scott Mandel, find me on Facebook. That's easy. That's my personal Facebook page, is Scott Mandel. Second part is, if you want to go to Mandel for Congress, you can also see more of me there. And those are the easiest ways to find me. Send me a message. Happy to respond back and connect with you. And that's the easiest way to do it, right? So I do check that every day. I want to jump back real quick, Clifton. Give me one more minute when I want to talk about the 8s. So I talked about, work, sleep, and then your personal 8s. And if you divide those 8s up: family, friends, and faith, health, hygiene, and hobbies, soul, service, and smile. Those are important. So anyway, with that, I wanted to be sure I finished that part of it up. But with that, that's how you can reach out to me and start following me. I know I've got a lot of followers on my Mandel for Congress. I think I've got 800 or 900 followers there. And so I'm going to expand on that. But then when I create the separate podcast, I'm going to let people know on both websites, on both Facebook pages, where to find me.
I love it. And for everybody who's listening to this episode of the podcast, I'm pretty sure, Scott, they've learned a handful of information. You provided them with so many different wisdom gems and different knowledgeable resources based off of your overall experiences and what you're continuing to do as far as just going against all odds, doing what works for you, and at the same time showing that hard work paying dividends within itself. With that being said, Scott, I just thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to simply bless us with an appearance on the HFWB podcast series. This was well done, my friend.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for educating your folks as you continue to do. And I'm happy to come on anytime.
No, of course, Scott, without a doubt. There'll definitely be more times down the road. And with that being said, this is yours truly, Clifton Pope, from the HFWB podcast series, which is sponsored by goandfeelgreat.com, where you can go and feel great for the long haul. I encourage everybody to stay healthy, wealthy, and blessed. Peace, love, and positive vibrations. And until next time, everybody.
See you later.